It's a total of 8 supplementals over the last 2 years. It seems to me, Madam President, that the government of Belize has changed its approach to budgeting. Or was it just a dressed up budget of $1.4 million for a nice IMF report in April of 2022? All the nice things that you see, all the indicators that are pretty, that the IMF love to hear. Debt reduction, primary surplus, etc. and etc. But, Madam President, there was almost $2 million that was not considered in that IMF report. Let us see what the other report will bring. Madam President, a budget is a forecast of revenue and expenditure generally for a 1-year period. A supplemental budget is one for urgent or unforeseen matters. And something unforeseen did happen. Hurricane Lisa. I am certain it's not only me that is surprised. The Belizean people, I'm sure, was expecting a supplemental for hurricane relief. $66.5 million. And a mere 16% of the funds has to do remotely with Hurricane Lisa. Madam President, the first set of papers sent for review did not include $4 million for health. When we got the second set, then I saw the $4 million, which indeed brings the recurrent side of the budget to $13 million, from $9 to $13 million. Hopefully now, the healthcare workers will see tape and Band-Aid and Tylenol and diabetes and hypertension medication, and let's hope purified water too. Madam President, it seems that the $4 million was dashed in like how the cook put in the salt when they forgot to put it in the pot. But that's okay. The truth of the matter, and the fact is that the pot was well seasoned with $300,000 for foreign travel, despite the Prime Minister saying that he will hold it down on foreign travel. $500,000 for rent. I recall saying that the last time, rent again. What happened? We are renting new buildings, we're setting up new structures. What is happening there? 500, the last time when we had that third supplemental, I recall commenting on the rental. And who is it being, which building are we renting? Are we moving? Are we, what is happening there? I don't know if going to a presentation to explain to me would have helped in any way. I have an obligation to highlight these things because from my experience with dealing with budgeting in the public service, I was a former finance officer in my public service career. Each line item in that budget, particularly the recurrent one, almost every ministry is broken down in those famous line items that says subsistence, materials and supplies, operating costs, and it seems to just be adding to a budget that was forecasted in April of 2022. But, Madam President, the kicker for me is the $1.5 million for new vehicle purchases. We are not in austerity then, but the public officers are. What a lame excuse for not speaking to public officers about their increments. I had a call. Maybe the other minister should have spoken about it. We did not have a discussion but we have the pot well seasoned here. Madam Speaker, you see, Senator Courtney asked me not to use the word again, and I'm trying not to. But I will say, though, that it is, with an R, it is a reckless budget. This government is spending monies as if though they are taking it from their wallets, out their back pockets, or going into their bags and spending money carelessly. Or they're pulling out a credit card with a limitless bottom, no balance, limitless. The question, Madam President, who will pay for it? It will be squeezed from the pockets of the Belizean people through the high fuel prices. We don't have to get into all of that and the high cost of fuel prices, Madam President. This budget offers no limit to the spending of this government for what they want to spend money for, but no relief at the gas pump. Limited relief from Hurricane Lisa, and absolutely no relief on food items. This budget, Madam President, is a squeeze on the Belizean people to cover the reckless spending of this government. I cannot support the bill, Madam President. Thank you.
I recognize Senator Colette Montejo.
Yes, thank you again, Madam President. As I entered the halls of this chamber this morning, I reminded all of us as senators that this is the time of peace, just as you did, Madam President. So I will ensure that I keep the peace.
And goodwill.
Let me start by correcting our dear Senator on her figures as it relates to hurricane relief for Hurricane Lisa that's in this supplementary. I'm certain that as a former finance officer, she would have gone through the supplemental line item by line item and would have arrived at the figure that I arrived at, but she was way off. Of this budget, $17,789,734 is allocated to hurricane relief, which is 25.2% of the 70.5. And had my dear Senator taken the time to attend the meeting that was held on Monday, that $4 million for health would have been clearly explained that it is going directly to the Carl Houston Memorial Hospital. If you go through this budget, Madam President, line item by line item, I often stress that we come here and we speak about the government, when in fact, these monies are allocated for the use of the public service, of which all of us are the government. When vehicles are parked, it's not for ministers, it's for the public servants to be able to get their job done. So what's the problem? What's the problem? And I can go through this budget and I do not see. Listen, it is emphasized and stressed over and over again. And anyone with any kind of financial knowledge, and I'm not one, I took a few courses in accounting here and there, but everybody knows that when a budget is set out, it's simply a guide. That as, let me break it down for you guys, ABC. 1, 2, 3, or whatever. When I, in my own home, set out my budget, all right? And this supplemental demonstrates the fiscal prudence of this Plan Belize Honorable John Briseno-led government. And every single international body will tell you, as a matter of fact, only just yesterday, and I must commend Senator Chris Coy and Financial Secretary Joseph Waite. They were highly commended again by the new US ambassador for their fiscal prudence and bringing Belize and rescuing Belize from the cliff in 2 short years. Our Prime Minister stood right next where I am and emphasized that in 2 years, our debt to GDP went from 133%. I remember Joseph Waite, our financial secretary, saying we are not on the cliff, we are falling off the cliff. And now, 2 years later, 63%. Unprecedented, unheard of. So, when and if we attend the meetings where these things are carefully explained and questions can be asked so that we come to this honorable house informed. Informed. It will make for a better debate, Madam President. Our Prime Minister and our leader of government business went to Venezuela on foreign travel. On foreign travel. Senator brought up 300,000 on foreign travel. The Prime Minister came back with 200+ million in debt reduction. Now, anybody that knows any kind of mathematics, that is real good investment. And you know what, Madam President? It's interesting that that kind of reduction, man, that represents 5 to 6% of reduction in GDP should be applauded, should be heralded, should be welcomed. And it's sad that it's being criticized. I did some quick research, Madam President. I'm going to say this for the record. Our very senator who had her math wrong in relation to hurricane relief could probably tell us about 12 million of that Petro-Carib that was spent while she was caretaker. Yes, that's why I'm holding the peace. I'm holding the peace. But 12 million, and I'm going to complain about 300,000 that is effectively used by this government when our ministers and officials of government, and it's not only ministers. I know that the Commissioner of Police has traveled on various trips representing this country. This country is back on the world map. And we are going to complain and try to fidget on $300,000? Let's get real, people. Let's get real. There is work to be done. There is work being done. There is massive accomplishments being heralded by this Plan Belize, John Briceño-led government, and we must accept that this supplemental is, where is wastage here? Where is corruption here? Where is not needs-based here? Where can you identify that the public service who uses the funds does not need these funds? Where? Where? If you can identify that, then you identify, then you tell the public servants that these monies are not to be spent. Madam President, Let me stop there, Madam President. I fully support this bill.
I recognize Senator Isabel Bennett.
Morning, Madam President. Thank you very much for the opportunity to stand and support this supplemental bill. With your permission, I would just like to congratulate a few organizations, especially those that work in UNICEF and others who had helped in the preparation and implementation of the Children Parliament that we had. They did a splendid job, especially to the staff here at the National Assembly who assisted the process as well. I would also like to identify the work of the Her Excellency Rosanna Briceño for the work that she and her team has been doing as it relates to domestic violence, putting an end to it. And for all those men and women, and I could really readily see the Facebook where they're highlighting the police department working in collaboration with the National Library staff. They have done a great job in reaching children and teenagers in sensitizing them about the scourge that we have in relation to domestic violence. I would also like to highlight the work of two other organizations, the Belize Bird Rescue and the Belize Audubon Society. Living in this environment that we treasure so much, there's always that need to have a striking balance between us as humans as we exist and the environment that we cohabitate. So I'd like to just congratulate those two organizations. I know there are many more, but for now I'll just put that on record. In relation to the Supplemental Appropriation Bill 2022-2023, I stand, as I said, to strongly support this supplemental bill on three basic reasons. We have inherited a lot of social ill as a result of poor governance prior to the Briceño administration. If we actually do the research within our society, we will see where there was a complete breakdown in many of the different ministries that we are now bringing alive as a result of good leadership. When you look at a budget, it always has to reflect some strategies that will combat any type of social ills that we have in our country. And this supplemental bill clearly outlined the fact that we have a government that is supporting the Women's Department through the Ministry of Human Development, Families, and Indigenous People Affairs. We also, as a country, is putting great emphasis on creating an environment or a society that has a sensitivity to diversity, whether we are physically diverse or otherwise, and monies has been allocated to that disability service department or division. And again, in keeping with the gender sensitivity that we have had of late, we also allocated money for gender-based violence services, as well as we continue to focus on economic development. Now, for persons that look at the supplemental bill and find, or try to find loopholes, it's obvious that they're not looking at a supplemental that is actually supporting the people of this nation. I close with those comments.
I recognize Senator Janelle Chanona.
Thank you, Madam President. And I apologize, I'm struggling with a throat issue here.
All of us.
I know, I was quite scared to see the COVID report making its debut once again. So I offer commiseration to everyone struggling with that. I am grateful to Senator Bennett Moody for raising the Children's Parliament, because I want to echo congratulations to the staff of the National Assembly, to the National Committee for Families and Children, and UNICEF, and to the Office of the Special Envoy, indeed, for putting together that exercise. I know it was a long time coming, and there were a few delays and glitches. Some tears may have been shed, but I think everyone learned that day a little bit more about how government works. And I call that out, Madam President, because I think with all of this, that's where I hope that we start, but we don't finish in terms of learning how government works and engaging with the system and removing anything that may intimidate us from engaging with our government. Because as Senator Monteo called out, indeed, it's our government, it's us. It's not some faceless person. We make up the government for the people, by the people. But I do want to call out that I did, as I sat in the gallery watching the activity that day, something did come to mind that was said earlier, that there was an air of political theater. And I think that for me struck a chord in that I don't ever want us to feel like we're at a show, that we're watching things happen and things are passing by and we're just kind of observers to it. I think we should also press ourselves that we never dare to intimate that this session or these actions are theater or going through the motions or checking boxes, but rather that we're engaged with it. And I do associate with the one line Senator Monteo called out just now in terms of looking at these line items. It's impossible to see that there's an issue with approving this. I know, as was called out earlier, we can't stop money bills, but I fully concur that looking at the line items and the usages that are intended for these funds, it's hard to say for majority of them that this is an issue or this is something that we can't support, especially the flagship hospital and others, and I'll go through a few of them. But I start there because I think then the onus or the matter that I'm hearing is not where the monies are intended to go, as has been mapped by all of these budgets, supplemental and otherwise, but that where they end up is where we might be stuck. And that's why we have some trepidation about this or concerns about this. Because I think that is where the whole matter of auditing and accounting and transparency and accountability really comes into play. And I think perhaps for too long we've seen that as somebody else's job. And yes, technically it is somebody else's job. It's the Auditor General's job, it's the Accountant General's job. But I think we have to arrive at a place where we see it as part of our job, that we get to know what are these line items, so that when we see that 4 million goes to the KHMH, that we can follow up, whether it's via the news, whether it's via the people that work there, whether it's, however, I mean, we're only so small, there are only certain people that we have to begin to ask, but we see ourselves as part of the audit and monitoring of these programs, because I know how offended and insulted I was to see Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse getting COVID relief. But I don't for 1 second presume that Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse aren't alive and well and maybe getting relief right now. And that is also something that we should have on our conscience every day, that we make sure that these funds are actually landing where they're meant to go. And if it's hurricane relief, that they're actually getting to hurricane relief. And if it's for the creation of a new department, that it's actually getting to that department so that those vital services are being provided. Because as was called out at that session, and again, thanks to Senator Koi and FS Wait for those context to the numbers, these are services that, as much as we have allocated here, are not enough. I think, to use a colloquial term, Minister Koi said, everybody's still a ball. It's still not enough. And we see it certainly on the streets. So again, if this is a fourth supplemental budget and it's still not enough, then it also begs the question of, well, maybe we really look to the budget cycle and figure out, well, are we not doing it right? I mean, I've sat in JPAC meetings where government officials have said these are copy and paste exercises. And maybe that's why we're also landing at this, because goodness knows where the copy and paste amounts are going, and these are the actual operating expenses now. But again, we have to figure out the process, and we have to see ourselves as a part of the process to monitor with all of this. And I will also say that I too asked the question in terms of the vehicles. It was told that the typical vehicle have a lifespan of 3 years. And I said it in jest, but I'll repeat it because it's not untrue. The newer the vehicle, it seemed like the faster they think they could drive and the faster it crash. And again, when I pass a government vehicle, I not green up and say, that goody get it. I see my tax dollars at work or bumper up. And that's, again, something that then ends up at some discarded government parking lot to be written off at a future date. We need to see ourselves as a part of this process, because, again, it will just be some type of cycle that continues to manifest and continues to be that we're putting monies out there, but we're not getting the return for it. And I want to call that out, that we have to be part of the auditing process to make sure that whatever monies are allocated, that they're landing where they go. And I will recognize Senator Montejo. He shared with us that he's an unpaid part of the auditing team. So if you have any issues there, you can certainly make sure Senator can tell you that he's seen that certain things that have been committed to have actually been delivered. But all of us should see that as an unpaid part of our role as citizens in this country, to make sure that we are auditing what exactly is happening, and we're then in a position to come forward and say, I need so-and-so to be held accountable because they were given X amount of money and we haven't seen it. We can't account for it. It's not where it needs to be. Because, again, I keep saying, we're not a poor country. We've just made some poor decisions. And we need to make sure the resources that we do have available, because we're not printing money and it's not coming out of any secret hole. But I don't want there to be this perpetual perception from the public that even if government got a windfall of money, that it wouldn't end up changing quality of life. It wouldn't end up making a difference. That can't be, cannot be. And I, for one, am not an actor, and I will not associate myself with pretending that this is some kind of theater show and we're going through the motions and we're just here to get a few gravel knocks and make ourselves feel good that we've made some personal slights and comments. This is serious work, and we have to see it as such. Thank you very much.
I recognize Senator Kevin Herrera.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I would just like to make a few comments on the fourth supplementary bill 2022. And I'd also like to thank Senator Koi for taking time out on Friday, I believe. Monday, sorry. Getting confused with the dates. On Monday to walk us through the numbers and to explain to us why the need for the supplementary that is being presented. Madam President, I think that budgeting exercises are not as much a marketing process or a presentation process as much as it is a planning tool. It's a planning exercise, a fiscal planning exercise, by which an organization, in our case, the government, goes through the process to try to determine and to predict what type of expenditures they'll have over a period of time. To do that, I think, to do that generally, budgets have to be conservative. They have to be achievable, and they have to be realistic. I know that we've had 3 situations, I think, that have tremendously affected our ability to predict and to come up with estimates that are closer to reality than they are. I think COVID is certainly one of them that threw all the numbers out. Hurricane Lisa, a couple months ago, or was it last month? A couple months ago, I think it was in October, was certainly another one of those. And then we had the, we had COVID, we had Hurricane Lisa, and we had the Ukraine war. That's the other one I wanted to mention, Madam President. Again, the Ukraine war has driven up inflation to a tremendous level, and I think that worldwide, I think the entire world is struggling with just trying to keep up, with the additional expenditures, and most of this has been driven by the increases in fuel over the years. And so I think that it is a struggle. Not only we see it in the private sector. You look at our companies, and it's even difficult to try to accurately predict what you'll face in the year. And so I sympathize with government, and I know that it's no easy task, given that it's a much larger organization. But when we look at $242 million over 4 appropriation supplementary bills over the course of a year, it begs the question of whether or not we could perhaps go through that budgeting process a little more tactical, a little more surgical, and perhaps be a little better with respect to how we're estimating the numbers. Coming back to what Senator Chanona mentioned, I think that she's right. We did have those types of sentiments were expressed in the JPAC that, trying to balance numbers, and so if we need to scale down and come up with a 5% savings, then that is what is done in a particular department or ministry. And so I'm saying that that type of approach probably does not lend itself to the principle of a budget being realistic. And so at the beginning in March, when the main budget is presented, and we're trying to close the fiscal gap between revenues and expenditures, in my view, when we do these supplementaries after or during the course of the year, perhaps we lose sight of what we were trying to achieve with respect to those gaps that we were trying to fill at the beginning of the budget cycle. And so I think that it's incumbent on us, Madam President, that we perhaps review about how we go about the budget process at the beginning of the fiscal period. I think that it would help a lot with respect to trying to get these numbers to be a little more realistic. $242 million is around 20% of the overall budget, I believe, and I stand to be corrected on that, but that's just a rough calculation I did. Now, on the specifics of the supplementary, Madam President, and Senator Koi explained the additional $4 million that in the Ministry of Health and Wellness that will go directly to the KHMH. I don't think that any of us would quarrel with that. In fact, I think we'd all agree that KHMH probably needs a lot more financing than it is being given. But the point I wanted to make with respect to the KHMH, Madam President, is simply this. that perhaps a large exercise should be taken with respect to the sustainability of that institution. It's so critically important for the health of this country, especially in respect to those who need critical care, those who don't have the finances to go to private institutions, those who do not have private insurance. And so it's extremely important, I think, for us to maybe undertake an exercise like that where, whatever it is, I understand right now government is putting in $28 million per year in terms of subventions to the KHMH, and I'm sure it could probably use a lot more. But also maybe look at the institution with respect to restructuring how it raises revenues. And especially with user fees, and especially for those who probably can afford a little more, who are using the services. The thing is with it is, there's one issue of affordability with respect to the KHMH, but that also, if we're not putting in the required type of financing in the institution, that has a direct impact on the quality of care that that institution will provide. And like I said, many of the people who are going there don't have a lot of options with respect to other facilities. And so I think it's incumbent on all of us. I think we have a responsibility to try to make that as best as possible for our citizens. The other point I wanted to get at, Madam President, is on Cap 2. And this would be, let me see if I can find it here. And this would be the expenditure under the Office of the Prime Minister with respect to the Community Development Fund and the social, let me see if I'm getting the names right ones. Yes, under Cap 2. Head 17, and there are two line items I wanted to touch on. There's the Constituency Development Fund Program, and there was the Constituency Social Assistance Program. Now I think that, in my view, and I stand to be corrected, but it seems like the Constituency Development Fund Program is running, I don't really have any criticisms of that fund. I think that funds are paid to private sector companies that provide materials and that type of thing. And this was in relation to Lisa relief, and persons who were affected and who were approved certain items could go there, get those items, and the company would bill the government directly. I don't see any major issues with that, Madam President. The one I really wanted to touch on was the Constituency Social Assistance Program. I know that these social assistance programs are extremely important, Madam President, and in fact, I mean, looking through the budget, you know, given the dire needs that are out there, you wonder, well, you know, how does this even touch the surface? And so I'm not quarreling with that. I think that a lot more has to be done for those who, you know, are struggling within the system. The issue I wanted to raise, Madam President, is more how this is carried out. And my caution to the administration is this. My understanding is that when government are expending money and spending, that there are certain processes that have to comply to the financial orders. And if these monies are given to area representatives directly, to then be given out for certain causes, I'm wondering if that complies to the financial orders. And I was going over it yesterday in terms of my preparation for my presentation today. I didn't see any type of provisions that it would have for that type of structure. Again, I stand corrected. I went through the financial orders, but I don't see the provision for it under the financial orders. Like I said, I'm not quarreling at all with the amounts. I think that there's a lot of need out there, and those monies have to be gotten out and try to help those who fall into or need help with respect to a social safety net. But at the same time, we cannot operate in a way that is non-compliant to the system we've established. And so these types of programs, perhaps, if they are non-compliant, that we should maybe look at putting in the structures where we can get this type of assistance out, but also comply to the system. I'm never comfortable when we make unilateral decisions or decisions that are not supported by a structure. I think that we're setting ourselves up for bigger problems down the road. The other point I wanted to raise, Madam President, is with amnesty, the amnesty program that we have. Again, no quarrel at all there. I fully support the program. I think that we have so many people in this country who live here are not going back. They're here illegally, and we're trying to regularize them within the system. I think that we had all supported that program. But I think that there's an opportunity, Madam President, that we should probably look at very closely, and that is, we're spending $2 million on this program, and the estimated persons that we were supposed to process within the program were supposed to be around 60,000, if I remember the leader of government business presentation, right? I think we were talking about 60,000 persons. My understanding is that from Senator Koyi, I think he had clarified this point, is that there are about 12,000 persons who have applied to the program so far. And we're pretty well into the program. In fact, we're looking at the other $2 million that is needed for the program right now in terms of this supplementary. I just don't want us to lose the opportunity that we've allocated these costs to cover this program and to try to get 60,000 people into the system, to regularize them in terms of their immigration status. And then we fall very far short, even though we would have spent the money. And so I'm thinking that perhaps we should have a rethink, Madam President, where we look at whatever mechanisms we need to try to go as close as possible to that 60,000 persons that we were estimating. If it's actually those 60,000 persons that are out there. Again, if they are, then I think we should seriously go after them, because we've set up the system, we're spending the money. And if we need to put in a little more to try to get that success rate to where we were estimating in, then I think we should, because, I mean, we're looking at the second $1 million being spent on the program. The last item I would like to raise, Madam President, with due respect, is with, I think, the Ministry of Natural Resources. land development acquisitions, and that's the $6 million. I think that this is an issue, I think, that is extremely, there's this saying that there's something that's very underreported. I think this is a much bigger problem than we've publicly expressed. I think there is hundreds of millions of dollars that are potential contingent liability. And so, whether it's $6 million or whatever it is, Madam President, I think the government has a responsibility to really look at this issue very closely so that we could at least try to contain the problem and then try to reduce it over a period of time. But if we're putting in these $6 million and $8 million and $10 million from year to year without really containing the problem, I think this is an issue that will be here for us over a long period of time. And again, we're talking about trying to find the most effective and efficient use of resources. And so we don't want to be using taxpayers' dollars and scarce resources in an inefficient way. And I think that it is inefficient if we're spending money on something that we could possibly have tried to fix and reduce as we're going along. And so this is a big issue. I think it's a huge issue. And I don't think that we as a government have really confronted it the way we should. Again, in closing, Madam President, I think that I would just like to appeal to the government to put a little more into the whole budget process and perhaps try to make it a little more realistic, a little more practical, so that we don't have to go through all these supplementals. Because when we're at the beginning of this process, we're doing all types of calculations with respect to expenditure versus what we're getting in terms of revenues. And so we would want those ratios to hold as we're going along. But when we have the supplemental, it really throws it out of whack because we don't know what the corresponding revenue side of it is. If the revenue side is going in tandem with the expenditures or increasing with the expenditures. And so I think that that's an extremely important point. And I think that perhaps in this new budget cycle, come March, that we would probably look at a little more closely at it, and I certainly will. So thank you, Madam President.
I recognize Senator Antonio Herrera.
Yes, Madam President, thank you very much. I will abide by my brother and Senator Montejo with peace. I will try to remain as peaceful as I can. However, there's many who will not get a piece of this supplementary. That is where I stand. Now, I will start first where the fishermen. I'm very passionate about the fishermen of Sartaneja, Chonosh, Capabanc, Progreso, Ranchito, Caledonia, San Joaquin, and Calcutta. There's nothing in this supplementary budget that allocates anything for their damage during this hurricane. I do not see it. They did not get affected directly, as I would say the residents of Belize City and Belmopan or stuff like that, but they got affected by their workplace, their boats. I mean, there was even a photo on social media with all their boats piled up against the swing bridge. They got affected in that way. They also got affected at their workplaces, their sheds, you know, where they harvest their lobster. And not to speak about the prices, the lower prices for this harvest period that has been lowered for the and for the lobster. So there's nothing here that will appease to these hard-working fishermen of these areas. I appeal that something be done that will assist them in their losses during this Hurricane Lisa. Next, be brief on this, on my comments. I also want to comment on the line item that says 1.5 million for the Corozal-Sarteneja Road. This is the second time this is coming on a supplementary. The first time it came at a 6.5 and now it's a 1.5 for a road that has been bought and paid for by the Taiwanese government. Where is this money going? Where is it going? Yes, that's all right. Where is this money going? This 1.5 now we see here. Highway robbery? Where is it? So now we come here to another supplementary for the Corozal-Sarteneja Road. Next, I would like to comment, and there's a positive comment for the $4 million that were allocated to the Carl Huchner. That's a great gesture. Very personal again, Madam President. We were in the news, a young boy with a great promise, a great future that was involved in an accident. Mother on national television claiming that she had to go daily to Chetumal to seek medicines because it's not available. Again, a young father came to me for assistance for what? Medicines again for his little boy that was in a hospital, right? What happened? The little baby passed away, sadly passed away. So we allocate $4 million only to the Carl Huchner. What about the other hospitals in this country that in dire need of funds? I mean, every day you see that the basic medical supplies cannot be met by these hospitals. And with this government that is squeezing the people, how can they have the money to buy such medicines? I ask again that we take a second look at this and some more allocations be provided to our healthcare system. And with this, Madam President, I close and wish you a Merry Christmas. My colleagues, that we have a Merry Christmas. I don't know about a prosperous New Year, but a Merry Christmas, guys. Thank you.
I recognize Senator Ian Jones.
Madam Speaker, I was unable to attend the consultation on Monday with Senator Koi, so I will not speak on things that I do not know about. But what I will speak about is what I could observe on the face of it in terms of the supplementary budget. Sports and youth is something that I keep dear to me. And I notice of the $70.5 billion, only $100,000 were allocated to youth and sports. Every single government-owned sporting facility was affected by Hurricane Lisa. Every single one of them. And there's no way that $77,000 could start to repair these facilities. So that's something I would want to implore the government to look more keenly on, because a sporting facility does not only cater to athletes, it has to do with the health and well-being of our citizens as well. And then $22,000 allocated to life skills within the youth department. With everything that has happened in terms of COVID, Lisa, catastrophes after catastrophes in the country, our youths mentally are stressed. And to $22,000, I mean, that's probably a one-day meeting or a seminar. We take pictures, we give interviews, and that's it. So I would want to see more pressed into that. But then I'll speak further into the fact that we have to again come and do a supplementary budget. And I will reiterate what Senator Herrera said, because I have had the experience of sitting in a budget consultation as a head of a government department. I think my first time was in 2017, and I rudely walked out of the meeting because it was obvious, just as Senator Chanona said, it was a copy and paste exercise. There's no real consultation that was being put into what would be the actual spendings for the previous year as to what we were budgeted for. And I believe that is exactly what has happened again, why we have to, for a fourth time, come to do a supplementary budget. We have to take this year as an example to budget next year, so that next year this time, we're not here again standing talking about a fourth or fifth or sixth supplementary budget. Around this time of the year, correct me if I'm wrong, Senator Koi, but most ministries have already submitted their budget forecast for the upcoming financial year. What I would have wanted to know is if proper consideration was taken into all the expenditures that we saw in addition this year that was not previously budgeted for, so that we could properly allocate it. And then I have to stress further, because a lot of times ministries complain about not having enough money. I know I used to be one of the persons who used to complain a lot. But then we also have to look at wastages and efficiency within these ministries. A lot of times, ministries do have sufficient if they were to use it efficiently and not have unnecessary wastages. So again, this is something the government has to properly look at. And again, as Senator Herrera said, we need to set budget estimates that are achievable and that are realistic. It cannot be that it continues to be a copy and paste exercise. Because I believe every single person, every single FO, every single person who deals with the budget exercise for the financial year, it's very frustrating. You're given a cap within your ministry, you're given pre-assigned line items, and basically you have to just make sure the numbers add up to that cap. So a lot of times, you'll add a zero here, you'll take away a zero there without doing proper consultation and analysis of what the needs of the ministries are compared to what was spent, what was wasted, and how more efficiently we could do it for the upcoming year. So I really would want it to be that if ministries have already submitted their budgets, that the Ministry of Finance and Senator Koi, who I always say I respect as the finance guru within the government, to take a proper look at these budgets and do proper consultation before we come April and present a budget to the nation and we do the whole theater show about how grand and great the budget is, and then come 2-3 months after we have to do a supplementary budget. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Madam President, sorry.
You're forgiven. It's your first time. Senator Bevan-Cal.
Thank you, Madam President. Madam President, I rise to support this supplementary that is before us today. I want to start off with first thanking the Belize Defense Force, the Coast Guard, who were there at the beginning, even before this term, during this term, and after this term, Madam President. I think they have done a heroic job in supporting the victims of the hurricane, even after, because we saw pictures of, police officers cleaning up after. I think they must be commended for the job that they have done, and I want to personally thank them publicly, Madam President. And I am happy to see that in this supplementary, there's allocations to repair the Price Barrack buildings that they have, because again, on social media, we saw some of our officers getting out during this term from one building to the next. And I think it's really important for us to recognize them and also support them, especially with the facilities that they have. Again, Madam President, the hurricane has done a lot of damage that will take years and years for us to recover, and of course, millions of dollars to at least get to a state that some of our people were before. And again, under the Ministry of Infrastructure Development, we see $3 million allocated for this cause. From what the minister said, that there was about 1,000 applications that are now served with the necessary help that they need. Again, Madam President, we can see where these monies are going. It's not wastage, it's not reckless, as we have heard, but instead it is, getting to the right people, because even the leader of the opposition, acknowledged this in the last meeting, that all area reps or their representative had to sign and the victims had to sign when they received the help that was needed. Again, Madam President, that is transparency, because each elected representative, whether the government side or the opposition, had access to those funding. Again, on social media, we saw a lot of people getting mattress, food pantries, zinc, and all of that, Madam President. So we can actually see the substance of this supplementary. It's really important. And of course, Madam President, one that is dear to me is in the Ministry of Rural Development, Community Development and Labor and Local Government, the allocation for the well rig. Madam President, I come from the South, and we have a lot of our rural communities that still does not have access to potable water. And it's really a shame for us to be in 2022 and having these type of scenarios in our country. So when I see these type of allocations, purchasing a new a rig that will benefit the many Belizeans that are really in need of potable water, Madam President, I think that is substance. So I fully support this. Yeah.
I recognize Senator Chris Cowie.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Madam President. I rise to make a few comments in connection with the very constructive statements and comments made by other members of this Senate. And I would like to start with the general approach that Senator Herrera took, and looking at the factors affecting predictability. His comments were COVID, Hurricane Lisa, and Ukraine. And I think, yes, Senator Kevin Herrera. And I think that's a very useful approach in terms of looking at the supplementary. Maybe stepping back a bit in terms of looking at the budget and being, as he put it, achievable and realistic. I think that is certainly the overall objective in terms of developing a budget. And it is true that there is some level of that incremental approach rather than the program budgeting approach that I think we want to move in the direction of. And I think has been the goal for the past, decade, 2 decades. But yes, there is that hampers the level of a realistic approach in terms of how the budget is arrived at on an annual basis. But that said, there is the question of the predictability. And as Senator the good Herrera put it, I think that there are a couple other factors to also account for. So in terms of looking at Hurricane Lisa, we also look at that more broadly in terms of climate events, unforeseen climate events. In August, for example, we had severe flooding. There were also the impacts of Hurricane Julia before Hurricane Lisa. So we had those types of events that impact us pretty much on an annual basis, and that is in large part why Belize ranks as in the top five of the highest in climate risk in the world, with estimates of annual losses to GDP of roughly 4%. So yes, we have those challenges that we have to face on an annual basis that is difficult to predict. This year in particular, but picking up from the latter part of last year, we also have inflation. Inflation with the overall global effort to pull us out of recession arising from the economic fallout of the COVID pandemic. Many governments spent very aggressively, and that had, coupled with supply chain issues, had an inflationary effect. That was exacerbated by the war in Ukraine. So we already had inflation building up late last year and really exploded into this year. And that has no doubt an impact on the budget. And that is one that does impact predictability, because how extreme will the level of inflation be? What will be the ongoing actions, not only in terms of the relevant governments and their fiscal and monetary policies across the world, but also those actions like the war in Ukraine and its impact on not only fuel prices, but food prices as well, through fertilizer costs. So those are additional events that impact on the predictability of a budget going forward. In the case of Belize, we have other specific factors that are relevant as well. One certainly is in terms of the implementation of public sector investment projects. I think in terms of the past, Belize has had not a good track record in terms of implementation of projects on a whole. We've had in our public sector investment program roughly 1.6 billion, comprising that full program, funded by multilateral development finance institutions and others. While we have that size of an investment program, the implementation has been slow. Under this current administration, that has improved by 27%. So it's a significant improvement in implementation. And that's why you see in terms of CAP 3, the increase in CAP 3, that's the reflection of the external financing, but also in the current year, you see the supplementaries coming through for additional disbursements. That's because Belize has picked up, the government has picked up in terms of implementation of these public sector investments. That is what we all want to see. We want to see the investments made and impact in a positive way our country, our people. When we look, however, at additional factors affecting predictability, we are forced to have a discussion on the past administration. If we look at the reference to the 240 million in supplementaries, one supplementary alone represented over $76 million, and that was for the settlement of the BISL debacle, the judgment that the past administration lost. That alone is $76 million of that 240. The former Prime Minister spoke of a poison chalice, that this current administration would be effectively inheriting this, having to deal with this poison chalice. But I think in addition to that poison chalice, there were also skeletons in the closet. And those skeletons keep emerging, the remnants of those keep emerging. And in this supplementary alone, we have to look at some of those. The reference to rentals and the rental costs, that has to do with the 5 Cs. A significant part of that has to do with the 5 Cs. Belize made a commitment to enable the 5 Cs to be represented in Belize, to host the 5 Cs. There's clear agreement in that regard, but we stopped paying or we're hardly paying the rent. So that is an accumulation of rental liabilities that have to be accounted for. So that is something that has to be paid. In the case of a 1.5 million, I think in the Ministry of Finance, the bulk of that has to do with outstanding subscription payables for ILO and other international organizations. In the case of the acquisition, the supplementary for acquisition payments, those again are in connection with settlements from the past. And even with respect to KHMH, that $4 million, $1.5 million of that is for vendors' payables, of which roughly $1 million is for Fabregas, for monies owing in terms of oxygen over 3 years. So we have a multitude of these remnants of liabilities that keep popping up that we have to address. And unfortunately, that means that impacts on predictability, and that requires supplementary appropriations to address those. The other Senator Herrera did raise as well the matter of the Corozal Sartaneja Road, $1.5 million for that, and that is a project that is funded by the Taiwanese. I think it's roughly a $50 million project, and the terms of that arrangement is that if there is any, well, I should mention that the structure of that arrangement is that the contractor, the OACC, the Taiwanese contractor, is the responsible party for the construction of that road. Funds in connection with that loan come directly from the government of Taiwan to OACC, who is then responsible for building that road. That money actually doesn't come through the government. However, one of the terms of that agreement is if there are any overrun in costs, overrun in the budget for the construction of that road, that the government is liable to make up for those overruns. And that is what this represents, that $1.5 million. In effect, at this point in time, there is already roughly a 10% overrun on that 50 million, and so that's why in the past there was a past supplementary for a payment in that regard, and again we are forced to make payment again for this $1.5 million. So those are I think areas that certainly impact on the overall predictability of the budget in our current year, but at the same time, and I repeat from what I had said in one of the past Senate meetings, that this in effect does reflect the government's prudent approach in dealing with financial matters for the government. It also reflects the commitment to good governance, commitment to following the law. The Finance and Audit Reform Act requires this process, and the government, this administration, fully embraces complying with the law in coming to the National Assembly, the Senate, for the requisite approvals in accordance with law. So I just wanted to highlight that and express appreciation generally for the constructive comments of members of this Senate. Thank you.
Madam President, in winding up the debate on the supplementary appropriation bill, I want to be brief. I don't know whether people think that they will be able to say things and get away with it in this Senate. They should know by now that we on this side will hold them to account. How can someone come to this Senate with a clear conscience and make an accusation of recklessness? Recklessness. Madam President, members of this Senate, when you wear a badge of shame, be quiet. When the Supreme Court of Belize declares that the government of which you are a part of illegally, unconstitutionally, and criminally spent $1.3 billion without parliamentary approval, and a supplementary bill comes before this honorable Senate, don't accuse people of recklessness. When in excess of $500 million from the Petro-Carib Fund was squandered without any accountability, don't come to this Senate and accuse people of recklessness. Wear your badge of shame in silence and seated. The purpose of bringing a supplementary is to bring to the National Assembly expenditures already performed or expenditures to be taken by the executive, seeking to put before the public and the constitutionally established body to review those expenditures to perform its function. So I will repeat, this government will, without shame, continue to bring supplementaries whenever the law of Belize requires it. That is our commitment, and that is our obligation, and we will do it. This supplementary, Madam President, Senators, has been brought because there are expenditures that we are required to take that were not budgeted. And Senator Coy, in his usual style, has identified a number of them. Senator Herrera, the good Herrera, has indicated some of the reasons that would justify why it was necessary to come back to Parliament for additional expenditure. And so I say, for the fourth time this year, we do so because the law requires it, and we will continue to do so. It is disappointing, Madam President, disappointing that Senator Beverly Williams will say that even if she may go on at a briefing by Senator Cowie, that she doesn't know that she would say anything different. These are the briefings that the social partner and opposition senators have called for, so that they can be informed to fully participate in the debate. Now we're being criticized, and it don't make no difference. These words will come back to haunt the good senator. You either want it or you don't want it. Make up your mind. I listened to a very curious presentation from Senator Antonio Herrera, the bad Herrera, complaining about supplementary appropriation for a road from Corozal to Sarteneja. Tony Herrera, is against a supplementary for the road from Corozal to Sarteneja. Let's be clear, when he goes to the people, we'll play the tape. He is against the supplementary for 1.5 million for the road from Corozal to Sarteneja and criticized the previous supplementary. I hope he not turn up at the road opening. You see, it's easy to come in here and criticize things without thinking about it. We have the record. We now know his position. The voters will speak on that issue. Senator Kevin Herrera raised two issues to which I would like to respond. The first is the Constituency Development Fund, and all I will say is that it is my understanding that the procedure and processes that are in place are designed to ensure compliance with the finance orders. I don't have the specific details, but I am aware of discussions in the cabinet and outside of the cabinet in which strict accountability is required on each occasion. So, Senator, I am assuming that the regulations are being complied with. On the question of the amnesty, what we have found is that, as we anticipated, some people are scared to come forward. They're scared to come forward because they are of the impression that if they don't have all the documents or they don't comply with any of the criteria, they would have exposed themselves and they would be subject to deportation. We have tried to explain that the purpose of this is to bring people out of the dark side and bring them into the light, into the formal sector. There will be no mass deportations. That is not the purpose of this. But a person who does not qualify for the amnesty and intends to make Belize his or her home can regularize by applying for a visa to stay. So it is not intended to try to find people, to round them up, and to deport them. Secondly, what we have found, Madam President, is that we had opened offices throughout the country. Many of the people who qualify for amnesty are working. The offices were closed on the weekends, like government offices. And therefore, whilst the office was open, many people could not find the time to come and to register. And so, two things. One, we started to do some outreach, which has been very successful. As we have moved from farm to village, etc., we have found hundreds of people who qualify, but who could not come to the offices. Secondly, we started doing some work on the weekend, having the registration officers do work on the weekend. The long and short of it is that in consultation with the people on the ground and the international organizations, IMO, IOM, UNICEF, UNHCR, we have signed a statutory instrument to extend the amnesty for an additional 3 months. During that period, we will be doing a significant amount of outreach to workplaces, to farms, to villages, etc., to try to get as many people that are in Belize in an irregular status to apply. So, Senator Herrera, we are aware of the fact that the amnesty period will expire. We have extended it, and we hope to get as many people registered under the amnesty. Let me close by saying this, Madam President. I agree wholeheartedly with what senators have said. Our obligation is to be a part of the auditing process of the government. The executive has the ability to spend money. We will continue to hold the briefings for those senators who wish to attend so that they can go into the details and ask their questions about the expenditure. And we will continue to bring supplementaries where necessary to this Honorable Senate for consideration. Of course, we also have the commitment that we will try as best we can to make the budget more accurate, for want of a better word, and therefore less supplementaries. Madam President, I ask that the question be put.
The question is that the bill for an act to appropriate further sums of money for the financial year ending on the 31st day of March, 2023 be read a second time. All those in favor, kindly say aye. Those against, kindly say no. The ayes have it.
The bill for an act to appropriate further sums of money for the use of the public service of Belize for the financial year ending on the 31st day of March, 2023.
I recognize the leader of government business.
Madam President, I rise to move the second reading of a bill for an act to amend the Customs and Excise Duties Act, Chapter 48 of the Substantive Laws of Belize Revised Edition 2020 to implement the Customs and Excise Tariff and Trade Classification based on the 2022 version of the Harmonized Commodity Description and Coding System, to implement the ninth phase of reduction of duties in accordance with the CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement, to implement the ninth phase of reduction of duties in accordance with the CARIFORUM UK Economic Partnership Agreement, to implement the first phase of reduction of duties in accordance with the Belize-Taiwan Economic Partnership Cooperation Agreement, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Madam President and honorable senators, in brief, what this bill does is implement the reduction in duties under these three separate agreements: the CARIFORUM EU, the CARIFORUM UK, and the Belize-Taiwan Economic Partnership Agreement. These are treaty obligations that we have, and we are discharging those obligations. Madam President, I ask that the question be put.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to amend the Customs and Excise Duties Act, Chapter 48 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2020, to implement the Customs and Excise Tariff and Trade Classification based on the 2022 version of the Harmonized Commodity Description and Coding System, to implement the ninth phase of reduction of the duties in accordance with the CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement, to implement the ninth phase of the reduction of the duties in accordance with the CARIFORUM UK Economic Partnership Agreement, to implement the first phase of reduction of the duties in accordance with the Belize-Taiwan Economic Cooperation Agreement, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto, be read a second time. All those in favor, kindly say aye.
Aye.
Those against, kindly say no. The ayes have it.
The bill for an act to amend the Customs and Excise Duty Act, Chapter 48 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2020, to implement the Customs and Excise Tariff and Trade Classification based on 2022 versions of the Harmonized Commodity Description and Coding System, to implement the ninth phase of reduction of duties in accordance with the CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement, and to implement the ninth phase of reduction of duties in accordance with CARIFORUM UK Economic Partnership Agreement, and to implement the first phase of reduction of duties in accordance with the Belize-Taiwan Economic Cooperation Agreement, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the leader of government business.
Madam President, I rise to move the second reading of a bill for an act to amend the Marriage Act, Chapter 174 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2020, to provide for the late filing of marriages, to empower the registrar to make regulations for the late filing of marriages, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. In brief, Madam President, the Marriage Act provides that marriage officers are to immediately register marriages. And what has been happening is that there has been a delay between the time of the marriage and when an attempt is made to register the marriage. The purpose of this bill is to grant some time, some flexibility in allowing marriage officers to do so late so that marriages can in fact be registered. Madam President, I ask that the question be put.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to amend the Marriage Act, Chapter 174 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2020, to provide for the late filing of marriages, to empower the registrar to make regulations for the late filing of marriages, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto, be read a second time. All those in favor, kindly say aye. Aye. Those against, kindly say no. The ayes have it.
The bill for an act to amend the Marriage Act, Chapter 174 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2020, to provide for the late filing of marriages, to empower the registrar to make regulation for the late filing of marriages, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, I rise to move the second reading of a bill for an act to extend the prescribed age of a person to hold the office of Auditor General or to act as Auditor General, and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Madam President, Section 109 of the Belize Constitution provides for the Auditor General. Under that section, an Auditor General is required to retire at 60, age of 60. Ms. Dorothy Bradley has been approached and, as I understand it, has agreed to serve as Auditor General of Belize, but she is over the age of 60. Section 109 of the Constitution provides that the National Assembly can pass a law to increase the age of retirement of a person who serves substantively or in an acting capacity as Auditor General. The purpose of the legislation is to ensure that the appointment of Ms. Bradley would be legal, since she has already passed the age set out in Section 109. The social partners have brought this to our attention, and they felt that it was necessary to amend the law or to pass a law to provide for regularity, and in accordance with their wishes, the Cabinet decided that it was a proper thing to do, and so we are here today on this bill.
I recognize Senator Ian Jones.
Madam President, whereas I do not object to this appointment of our extension for Madam Bradley, what I'd want to implore the governments to do is to further strengthen the Auditor General's department, to properly staff and properly fund the department. I had, during my tenure as the Director of National Sports Council, I had a sit down with the Auditor General during, I believe it was the month of June 2017. I had just become the Director of Sports then. And they were auditing the National Sports Council for the year 2015. I think we all know, because it was in the news in terms of what that report was about. I know for a fact that currently there is a legal criminal proceedings against a previous employee. But what I want to say is that what was expressed to me by the Auditor General was that we found ourselves in that situation because the National Sports Council had not been audited since prior to that, from 2007. And what she had said to me then was that it was impossible for them, despite the Sports Act saying that the Auditor General was to audit the statutory body every 12 months, it was impossible for them to do it because of their understaffing and underfunding. And we spoke earlier about the budget and about efficiency and accountability. And until we can properly staff and fund the Auditor General's Department to be able to have that oversight in every ministry that they're tasked to do, then we will continue to have recurrent problems despite which administration is the administration of the day. So that is my contribution to that, Madam President.
Madam President, again, I thank Senator Jones for his contribution. I find it remarkable that he had this experience. What did his government do? All of a sudden, on the road to Damascus, we find out, oh, we need to expand and fund the office. What did your government do? Huh? Madam President, this government is the government that is increasing the budget for the Auditor General. We all understand that that office plays a critical role in auditing the finances of this country. We all understand that the offices is understaffed and underfunded. But unlike the other party, we are doing something about it. And we will continue to do so, Madam President, because we believe that the Belizean people are entitled to compliance with the Sports Act or any other piece of legislation that requires our accounts to be audited. Madam President, I ask that the question be put.
Honorable members, the question is that the bill for an act to extend the prescribed age of a person to hold the office as Auditor General or to act as Auditor General and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto be read a second time. All those in favor, kindly say aye.
Aye.
Those against, kindly say no. The ayes have it.
Madam President, in accordance with Standing Order 10.8, I move that the proceedings on the order of people may be entered upon and proceeded with at this day's sitting at any hour though opposed.
Honorable members, the question is that the proceedings on the order paper may be entered upon and proceeded with at this day's sitting at any hour opposed. All those in favor, kindly say aye. Aye. Those against, kindly say no. The ayes have it.
The bill for an act. The bill for an act to extend the prescribed age for a person to hold the office as Auditor General or to act as Auditor General and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Committee of the Whole Senate on Motions and Bills.
Honorable members, in accordance with Standing Order 68A, the Senate will now resolve itself into the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee, a committee of the whole Senate, to consider the motions referred to it and thereafter. In accordance with Standing Order 54, the committee of the whole Senate to consider the bills that were read a second time. Honorable members, I will now take the chair as the chairperson of the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee, and then as the chairperson of the committee of the whole Senate. Honorable members, I now call to order the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee. Recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, the Constitution and Foreign Affairs Committee has met and considered the appointment of Ombudsman Motion 2022, the resolution authorizing the accession of the United Nations Convention on the Use of Electronic Communications in International Contracts Motion, the resolution authorizing the ratification of the 2012 Cape Town Agreement, Motion 2022, the resolution authorizing the accession of the Convention on the Conservation and Management of High Seas Fishery Resources in the South Pacific Ocean, Motion 2022, and has agreed that they be returned back to the Senate for adoption.
Honorable members, the question is now that the appointment of the Ombudsman Motion 2022, the resolution authorizing the accession of the United Nations Convention on the Use of Electronic Communications in International Contracts Motion 2022, the resolution authorizing the ratification of the 2012 Cape Town Agreement Motion 2022, and the resolution authorizing the accession of the Convention on the Conservation and Management of High Seas Fisheries Resources in the South Pacific Ocean, Motion 2022, that the Senate authorizes the government of Belize to adopt these motions. All those in favor, kindly say aye. Aye. Those against, kindly say no. The ayes have it.
Reporting and third reading of bills.
Madam President, I rise to report that the Committee of the Whole Senate has considered the General Revenue Supplementary Appropriation Number 4, 2022-2023 Bill 2022, the Custom and Excise Duties Amendment Bill 2022, the Marriage Amendment Bill 2022, the Auditor General Extension of Prescribed Age Bill 2022, and have passed it without amendment, and the Trade in Endangered Species Bill 2022 and have passed it with amendments. I now move that these 5 bills be read a third time.
Honorable members, the question is that the General Revenue Supplementary Appropriation Bill Number 4, 2022-2023 Bill 2022, that the Customs and Excise Duties Amendment Bill 2022, that the Marriage Amendment Bill 2022, and the Auditor General Extension of Prescribed Age Bill 2022 be read a third time, and that the Trade and Endangered Species Bill 2022 with amendments be read a third time. All those in favor, kindly say aye. Aye. Those against, kindly say no. The ayes have it.
The bill for an act to appropriate further sums of money for the use of the public service of Belize, for the use of the public service. A bill for an act to appropriate further sums of money for the financial year ending on the 31st day of March 2023. Custom and Excise Duty. A bill for an act to amend the Customs and Excise Duty Act, Chapter 48 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2020, to implement the Custom and Excise Tariff and Trade Classification based on the 2022 version of the Harmonized Commodity Description and Coding System, to implement the 9th phase of the reduction of duties in accordance with CARIFORUM EU Economic Partnership Agreement, and to implement the 9th phase of reduction of duties in accordance with the CARIFORUM UK Economic Partnership Agreement, to implement the first phase of the reduction of duties in accordance with the Belize-Taiwan Economic cooperation agreement and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental to. Marriage Bill. Bill for an Act to amend the Marriage Act, Chapter 174 of the Substantive Laws of Belize, Revised Edition 2020, to provide for late filing of marriages and to empower the registrar to make regulation for the late filing of marriage and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Auditor General. The bill for an act to extend the prescribed age of a person holding the office as Auditor General or to act as Auditor General and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto. Trade Endangered Species Bill. A bill for an act to give effect to the provisions of the CITES on international trading in endangered species of wild fauna and flora to promote the management and conservation and protection of threatened and endangered species and to provide for matters connected therewith or incidental thereto.
I recognize the Leader of Government Business.
Madam President, with your permission, I believe that unless there are some unforeseen exigencies, this is the last sitting of the Senate for this calendar year. Allow me, on behalf of the government side of the Senate, to start by thanking you for the excellent way in which you have managed the affairs of this Honorable Senate. I think I would be accurate in saying that whilst those on that side misbehaved, from time to time, it is with expertise and it is with expertise and adroitness that you are able to bring them to order so that we can have a good debate of the people's business. So we would like, Madam President, to thank you for your stewardship of this Honorable Senate. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank the clerk, the deputy clerk, and their staff for the excellent way in which they have supported the work of the Senate. Quite often they labor very late in the night and in the evening under tremendous pressure to have the papers prepared and to have the papers delivered, and also to provide from time to time guidance to some of us on questions of procedure and substance. So to the Senate staff, we would like to offer our very best thanks and gratitude for all the work. To colleague senators, we have had healthy debates. We have had, I believe, very informative and substantive debates on matters that affect the public welfare of the country. And I will accept that all of us, I believe, have performed in good faith and in the interest of discharging our responsibilities as senators and members of the upper house. Madam President, it's the Yuletide season. On behalf of the government side of the house, and I keep saying the government side because Senator Smith accosted me the other day, informing me that I keep saying on this side, and that I'm not speaking for the people behind, it's just the government side. So on behalf of the government side, I would like to wish all the senators, yourself, Madam President, clerk, deputy clerk, and the staff of the National Assembly the very best wishes and the blessings of Christ our Savior during the Yuletide season. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you, Leader of Government Business and Leader of Opposition Business.
Be nice, be nice, be nice.
Roger, right? Thank you. Madam President, I will be very nice. It's the Yuletide season, and I will say a simple Merry Christmas, and I will say a very prosperous New Year to everybody here at the house, to all Belizeans, and I will take advantage and say to all the wonderful people of Belize Rural Central. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you.
Madam President, I move that the Senate do now adjourn.
Thank you. Certainly, before I do put the question, for your kind words from both sides. And also, thank you, Leader of Government Business, for recognizing the hard work, the excellent work of the clerk and the staff of the National Assembly And from my family to all of you and to Belize, I do wish you a peaceful, safe, blessed holiday season. Honorable members, the question is that the Senate do now adjourn. All those in favor, kindly say aye. Aye. Those against, kindly say no. The ayes have it. The Senate now stands adjourned. Very efficient, 3 hours.
You see?